Today on The Nation Speaks, an unbelievable 9/11 hero story.
It was a one-way mission.
Fighter pilot Heather Penney was sent to take down a hijacked plane,
Ramming our jets into the airliner.
That's crazy.
Honestly, I don't believe it.
Gives you shivers.
But Flight 93 met with a different fate. Learn why their bravery is still her biggest inspiration.
What the passengers on 93 did that day gives me hope.
Hello and welcome to a special The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Drucker. Today, we honor the victims and heroes of 9/11, particularly the souls of Flight 93. Our guest is able to tell her story in part because of their bravery. On September 11, 2001, 4 passenger planes were hijacked by al-Qaeda terrorists. 3 hit their targets, 1 did not, because the passengers and crew of Flight 93 attacked the hijackers, and the jet crashed into a Pennsylvania field instead of reaching its likely target, the U.S. Capitol. But did you know that a pair of F-16s were also in the air, sent on a suicide mission to find and stop Flight 93? Heather Penney, call sign Lucky, was one of those 2 pilots, a truly remarkable woman, not only for her service on 9/11, but she was deployed to combat twice as one of America's first female fighter pilots. Today, she's a senior resident fellow at the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies and a defense policy advisor. Here's my conversation with Lucky Penney. Heather Penney, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's really a privilege to be able to be here with you.
You have one of the most incredible stories that I've heard about 9/11, of which there are so many. And even though you've told it before, I think a lot of people have not heard this story. But before we get into it, maybe just introduce yourself a little bit. What's your family background? How is it that you came to be a fighter pilot, not an everyday profession?
No, being a fighter pilot is not an everyday profession, but fortunately I was raised by a fighter pilot. So my dad was a fighter pilot. I'm a 3rd generation pilot, military pilot. My grandfather was an instructor in World War II. And I grew up knowing that my dad had flown in Vietnam. And he was still actually flying fighters in the Reno Air National Guard, flying F-4s. So I grew up around fighters, and I just loved the jet. It was so fast and big and mean looking, even just sitting still on the ramp. And I loved the brotherhood of the fighter pilots, the squadron. I mean, it was such a great way to be able to grow up that I knew that when I got older, that's what I wanted to be.
How long were you on the force before 9/11?
I was a brand new lieutenant. I had just gone through pilot training, earned my wings. I'd spent a year learning my major weapon system, the F-16. So I had just gotten back from qualifying in the F-16 and had earned my mission qualification status, my combat mission ready status, just that March of 2001.
Wow.
So I was still a new guy.
Let's go to 9/11. Let's start the day. What would a normal day look like for you? What should that day have looked like?
We were actually really low on people in the squadron because we had just gotten back from a major exercise called Red Flag in the Nevada desert. And being in the DC Air National Guard, most of our airmen were part-timers. You know, the National Guard, these are citizen soldiers. So it was a skeleton crew that morning. I was actually not on the flying schedule. I was going to be part of, you know, the small corps. There's like a handful of us there in the squadron that was going to plan out the next month of operations there in the fighter squadron. So I was stuck in meetings all day, or I should have been.
When did you first learn that something was terribly amiss?
I was in a scheduling meeting with the other pilots when one of our enlisted troops, David Callahan, knocks on the door and walks in, and we were kind of surprised. We looked at him, we're like, what are you doing? And he says to us, an aircraft just hit the World Trade Center. And we looked at each other, and we looked outside, and it was a spectacularly glorious blue day. And we thought, well, how does that happen? And we just made the assumption that it was a light general aviation aircraft flying down the Hudson, maybe wasn't paying attention and bounced off a building. That's all we thought. So we went back to work. And it wasn't until the second aircraft hit the second World Trade Center And David Callahan came back and said, and second aircraft, it was on purpose. And that's when we got up from our meeting and saw on the television what everyone else saw that morning. And it was clear that our nation was under attack.
What happened next?
Nothing fast enough. You see, we're the DC Air National Guard, and we did not have an alert mission at that moment in our history. Alert, where we had fighters armed with real weapons, real missiles, ready to go at a moment's notice, that all went away after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. So our nation had five units guarding our borders. And they were all looking out, they weren't looking in. And we weren't part of that.
So were you the only possible squadron that would be available for action?
Except that we didn't have any weapons. And we didn't have the chain of command. Those alert squadrons, there's a chain of command that allows the nation's leadership to be able to scramble them. They have standing rules of engagement of how they're supposed to intercept and handle threats to our nation. But we didn't have the rules of engagement. We didn't have that chain of command. There was no way that the federal chain of command could have gotten through to us because we're a National Guard unit. The other challenge is that Guard units they belong in civilian times to the governors. This is how our citizen soldiers respond to things like firefighting, floods, hurricanes. They're at the disposal of their governor. But our chain of command went directly to the president, and President Bush was pretty busy at that point in time. And honestly, I don't even know that he would have thought to try to activate us. So getting the authorization to launch and then getting the weapons on board the aircraft were our two biggest problems.
So how are those addressed?
We did have some leadership there in the squadron. We had General David Worley, who was our wing commander, our operations officer, Major Mark Sasseville, now General Mark Sasseville, and we also had our weapons officer, Major Dan Kane, again, also General Dan Kane now. Together, they made decisions about the risk that they could accept and the actions that they could take and what they could not do. So they had Dan Kane, Raisin Kane, call down to our bomb dump where we store all of our weapons and order our troops down there to start building up missiles. People don't realize bombs and missiles, when we store them in the bomb dump, they're not like, you don't pull off the plastic wrap and just load it up. We actually store all the components separately to prevent errors from happening. And so they would have to build up the rocket motor, the fusing, the bomb body, the explosives, the guidance kit. They would have to build all of that up together.
So how long would that take?
Too long.